now. Good morning, Chris, and you should be able to share now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Greg and Rocky, for inviting us to be part of this today, and thank you, everybody, for showing up. Looking forward to a good conversation to let you know a little bit more about solutions journalism and the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, and I look forward to hearing your questions and potential story ideas too that can work with Lauren and I. Lauren Lindstrom is joining me from the Charlotte Observer. I'll give a brief, kind of overview of what we do and who we are, and then turn it over to Lauren to highlight some of the stories that she's worked on over the past year with a solutions angle for the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative as well. So hold on one second. All right.
So I'd just like to go ahead, just welcome everybody, and thank you, Chris, for jumping in there, and Lauren, and we're looking really forward to welcome to another Fridays with Rocky. I'm Rocky, by the way, and anyway, we are going to be talking about solutions journalism, as Greg said, and how it interfaces with affordable housing. And as Greg had mentioned earlier, yes, this started off as more or less a law of nonprofits kind of presentation show, but a lot of this kind of harkens back, and I think that we'll get into this. It comes back to my sort of prior life when I was running the Community and Economic Development Legal Clinic at the Charlotte School of Law. And at that time, my law students and I were providing free legal services to all the neighborhood associations in the Charlotte area. And during that time, we started to see many of the sort of seeds of sort of the development and the overdevelopment and the gentrification and all the things that we're seeing, and the seeds of this crisis. Well, we've always sort of had the crisis with affordable housing, but it's exacerbating of it in this last 5 years. And so obviously this is a new spin. In the last episodes, we've had the Charlotte Housing Coalition, the Housing Justice Coalition, we've had the West Side Community Land Trust. But this week we're going to take a different spin, and we're going to look at it from a journalistic point of view and learn about solutions journalism. And now I guess I'll give it to you, Chris. Let's learn.
Great, thank you, Rocky. So real quick, what is solutions journalism? We all know that local media is faced with many challenges: decline or loss of content, to address critical community information needs, exacerbation of the news divide, and persistent uncertainty around long-term financial sustainability, not only for newspapers, but also for other media players like digital startups, public media, and even TV. Solutions Journalism Network is responding to those challenges with a solutions-based collaborative approach that strengthens local news ecosystems. So to put it basically, SJN defines solutions journalism as rigorous and compelling reporting about responses to social problems.
So Chris.
Yes.
So if I'm listening to this about solutions, how would you differentiate solutions journalism from, I guess, regular journalism?
So I, often tied to the process of telling the whole story. So it's, and that's WHOLE. W, what response does it address? H, how it works, or the how done it instead of the who done it. O, offers insight. L, includes limitations, and E, provides evidence of impact. Okay. So it primarily focuses on a response to a problem and how that response works in meaningful detail. Focuses on effectiveness, not good intentions, using available data and evidence or results. But it also includes limitations. So, and some of the examples that Lauren will share, where we're looking at other cities and how they have addressed the problem of affordable housing, and how those cities, those responses may apply here to Charlotte. Okay. So in 2016, SJN launched its first project in Philadelphia. We followed that in 2019. The Charlotte Journalism Collaborative was officially formed through a partnership of SJN and the Knight Foundation. launching with 9 partners jointly reporting on the affordable housing crisis in Charlotte. Similar to the project in Philadelphia, the collaborative launched with this initial funding to organize and become self-sustaining while addressing the issues that matter most to Charlotte residents. So, part of this is, gone are the days when a single newsroom or news organization has the resources to dominate local news,
Okay.
or when multiple organizations would enter fierce competition to win, so to speak, on the local story. So this project really seeks to find out how, these 6 local media partners, along with our very important community partners, can have more impact. So these are the current members of the Charlotte Journalism. We have the Charlotte Observer, WCNC, our NBC affiliate, WFAE, our NPR affiliate, Q City Metro, La Noticia, Q Notes, and then our community partners include the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, of course, Free Press, and the Knight School of Communications at Queen's University. In its first year, the CJC increased engagement of audiences and communities across all of these media partners. In addition to producing high quality journalism, we followed through on our commitment to build some community connections. WCNC's audience engagement in September of last year did a 30-minute public affairs special called I Can't Afford to Live Here, which kind of formally launched the collaborative. That aired twice, and once following the 2020 State of the Union address, had about 30,000 viewers. We also held an early event at Imagine On called Imagine Home, Co-Creating Solutions for Housing in Charlotte. And in year 1, the partners published 31 stories specifically for the collaborative, including 8 statement stories that were a little more complicated and contextual. In addition, over 120 affordable housing stories and 80 episodes of WFA's Finding Home have been shared among other media partners. That's one of the big benefits of this collaborative, is that it broadens that audience for all of our partners. And that goes both ways. For the Charlotte Observer, those stories are able to be, republished through Q City Metro or Q Notes and reach specific communities, and vice versa. For some of our smaller partners, they're able to really broaden the audience for the stories they're producing as well. This year, we're on track to do more than 150 stories on affordable housing and COVID-19, including at least 12 cross-newsroom collaborations, 2 multimedia projects, one I'll highlight after Lauren talks, and at least 6 community engagement events that we do primarily with the library.
So Chris, how did Solutions Journalism get to Charlotte, or is that going to be answered a little further on?
Well, I think the Solutions Journalism Network really saw a need and also a desire among the Charlotte media community. We're also very happy, and lucky to have Knight Foundation here in Charlotte with a big commitment to not only the problems and issues that face us as Charlotteans, but also a strong commitment to journalism and local news in our area. So I think the two combined, collaboratives have happened in Charlotte before, but it was good timing for, I think there was a desire to see what could happen if these journalistic partners could work together around this issue. And with the background behind SJN forming this in Philadelphia to address similar issues, the Philadelphia collaborative actually started with a reentry project, but they are also looking at affordable housing as well in some of their work. They have expanded drastically from a project to its own nonprofit, and I think they have over 20 media partners now. We are in year 2 of a 3-year kind of incubator process. So we're now looking at how do we expand, and what are the growing goals and outcomes for the collaborative as we grow in the city, and how can we better serve the needs of the community through our work.
So when the idea got to Charlotte, it sounds like, so is it the Knight Foundation that's been sort of the main sort of the seed capital, I guess, for this project?
Yes, this was part of a large funding that the Knight Foundation did for local journalism through a project called the Local Media Foundation, or Local Media Project, that is a part of the Solutions Journalism Network. And you know, Charlotte's actually being seen as a model for collaborative journalism now. We were, really highlighted in the Cooperative Journalism Summit last year. SJN has gone on they have over 10, I think 11 collaboratives now in the country. They've started, I think 3 of those are in the process of starting this year and building. There's a new collaborative in Chicago. There's a new collaborative in the Northeast. And a lot of them are looking toward Charlotte. And, it's great that we're here at the library, because that's been a key factor in, I think, our success, is that partnership with the library, which is now being modeled in other collaboratives across the country. We've had 2 collaboratives this year that are projects of SJN that have added local library partners to their work, because they really see that benefit in connecting directly with the community. And Lauren may be able to share a little bit more.
Yeah, both Chris and Lauren. I'm sorry if I'm just focusing question. I'll just hop on in. I just want to, I just think, because I see a sort of a trend here. And do you see solutions journalism and then this collaborative approach? Because this seems very new to me, because when you hear about media studies and critical media, it's all about, we had 30 media companies 20 years now, we have 5. It's all about consolidation. But it sounds like here this is almost like a cooperative model of media, which it's refreshing personally to kind of see that. And do you see this trend continuing in Charlotte and even around the country?
I would say yes, and Lauren was part of the process. I think when the collaborative first formed, I joined on as a reporter initially, and then I came on as director in May. But I mean, I'll somewhat quote. I don't have the quote exactly. I think it's on one of my slides actually, from Sherry Chisenhall at the Observer, and just the fact that we realize we can do so much more as a collaborative partnership than we can do on our own. And, that comes, speaks to, the outreach and the community engagement that media partners are able to have, the joint reporting. I mean, with the pandemic, I've seen, and Lauren can probably share other examples, but I've seen where, we've had one reporter from one media outlet offer to serve as a camera person for another reporter from another media outlet. And just the
silos are breaking down, then, it sounds like, between the different media groups. And it just sounds like that's a new trend. That's cool.
Yeah. One of our contact tracing stories this past year, when we pivoted to cover COVID-19 because we knew it was important that we do so from a collaborative perspective, but we didn't move away from affordable housing. So we're kind of covering both areas as the CJC now. But one of the early, the pieces we did earlier this year on contact tracing was actually done by Lauren and Nate Morabito and David Borax, where they interviewed together, they published together, and then that story was shared among all 6 media partners.
That's fascinating. I mean, because I think when we first met and we talked about solutions journalism, this collaborative, but really when you really drill down, this is sort of, I won't call it revolutionary, but it's definitely very new in media. The idea that you could collaborate with other media folks, and obviously you've got La Noticia, which has obviously a different, a different demographic than, say, even QC Metro, or even well, not the Charlotte Business Journal, they're not in there, but, or just WFAE for that matter. And the fact that you could collaborate and cross and take the strengths of each of the different media folks and able to kind of create a more enriching and more holistic kind of I guess, product to consumers. That's really that's really interesting. So I know I've kind of tied you up here, but I see this great slide here. So maybe we can dive back into how affordable housing became the topic du jour for the collaborative.
Yeah, Lauren, let me turn it over to you, and you can talk about the story and other, kind of the beginning of the process.
Yeah, well, hello everybody. My name is Lauren Lindstrom. As Chris said, I cover affordable housing for the Charlotte Observer. Been in Charlotte just under 2 years. Came here for this position, and really my position was created much in the same spirit, not directly because of the collaborative, but I think it had similar. It has a similar origin story in news organizations like the Observer looking around and saying we need to put a more dedicated focus on housing coverage as its own thing and not, as a piece of somebody's business beat or a piece of somebody's city hall beat. But, if housing is the thing that city leaders are talking about, advocates are talking about, business leaders are talking about, they found it important to have a position fully dedicated to it, which is new for the Observer. So when the collaborative came about, it made sense to say, well, we have a housing reporter, so, she can join in on that. But I really think both the creation of my position as well as the creation of the collaborative really recognized that there's not much in our city that doesn't get touched by housing, right? Mm-hmm. Where you live, where your kids go to school, where you have access to jobs, whether or not you have access to transportation, if your neighborhoods are safe, if your neighborhoods are, if you're building wealth where you live or not, those are all tied to housing. And so I think with the collaborative, and particularly with the solutions model, there's this idea that readers are a little bit fatigued by this idea that everything is grim and dark and doomsday. And I think as reporters, we recognize that and we see that all the time. And so the solutions journalism model says, what is our role as reporters to investigate out what is being done elsewhere and what can be done about these problems that seem so intractable, so entrenched. Is there a way out? And I think for an old school journalism model, there can be a little bit of hesitation to be, advocates or to be, offering particular solutions. And I think the solutions journalism model is not Pollyanna-ish in the idea, here's the silver bullet, here are the ideas, but it's, let's look at what other communities are doing without saying this is the right or wrong way to do something, but, let's get rid of excuses for people to say nothing can be done.
So you would say, so Lauren, I guess, because I know when I took a journalism class a long time ago when I was in college, and I remember that saying, if it bleeds, it leads. And so this sounds like this is something different than that model, just sort of searching for the most salacious, sort of most, whatever, would catch the eyes. We're actually trying to put forward real sort of solutions to these really intractable social problems that we have in this city. Would that be a fair assessment, or is it a little more nuanced than that?
I think so. And I think the stories by nature, if it's a solution story, are going to be nuanced, right? They're going to be complicated because, as Chris said, the stories that kind of fit the solutions journalism model, if you were going to kind of create a rubric, is, things that we can kind of put to the test of the metrics. Can you show us whether these are working? Acknowledge limitations to programs. The slide that's on right now is looking at community land trusts, which I learned before you had heard from the folks here in Charlotte if you'd been on a previous conversation here. And so in fall of 2019, with some funding from the Solutions Journalism Network, I was fortunate to fly out to Seattle, where they have a well-funded, well-established community land trust, which, for folks who have not been on the previous call, is a nonprofit model that lowers the barriers to home ownership by saying, we will sell you homes at lower than market rate costs, but keep possession of the land underneath it. And you sign a contract and it says, you will be able to build equity in this home. It's kind of a controlled equity gain, right? So it's affordable for the next buyer. So you can't, there are limitations in the sense that you don't get the full equity like you would if housing prices ran away, but it also allows people to get into home ownership in a way that they would have been renting forever. And so it's a really interesting model that's supposed to kind of control the price of land and keep certain neighborhoods affordable.
Stop flipping.
it's like the anti-flipping, right?
Yeah.
Nonprofit keeps the land and says, you can't just sell it to anybody. You agree when you're ready to sell it and upgrade or whatever, that you sell at an affordable price. And so I spent a couple days out there, spoke to them, spoke to some homeowners who've been in the program who said, in Seattle, the notorious Seattle, there was no way we would have ever been able to buy a house. We are now not renting, we are building, a modest amount of equity, and we have a home we own. And, there's criticisms of that program too, but really was able to examine that in a way that was, I think, somewhat nuanced at the same time that Charlotte's program was getting off the ground. And so I have a companion story about,
So here's a
Go
question,
ahead.
Lauren. So in Seattle, I'm just kind of curious, it is a much more fertile area for community land trust. What was your take of the folks who were living in the land trust? Did they feel that they were losing equity, I guess, because of the shared equity model, or did they feel like pretty happy that they actually had a house they could call their own, and that they could, they had all the sort of, I guess, benefits of sort of home ownership? I mean, I'm just, because I know when we've talked about community land trusts around here, and obviously I see Charisse here. This is great. There's that saying, particularly here in the South, we're very much property rights, very much, we're going to, and it's been the biggest wealth creation tool. And so how, one of the things that I think that many advocates are, having to kind of come up with, like a solution to is to how to answer that question, because that notion of, oh, it's a great American thing to own a house, and I bought it for $50,000 in 1970 whatever, and now it's $400,000. And it's been one of those things where I think if you talk about it from that community standpoint, that we have to conserve it, kind of like conserving land for the nature. We have to conserve affordable housing for everybody who works or something like that, or people coming out of college or something like that who want to have an opportunity. But I was just curious, like, what was the take on the ground in Seattle of those folks who were either living in there? Did they have sort of that view, or were they pretty happy or with the setup?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're like self-selecting because these are people who have chosen to be in this program and also connected to me by the land. I mean, like, there's an acknowledgement that the people that you talk to are probably pretty happy with it. I think the overwhelming thing that I heard, and I have heard here in Charlotte, is that the biggest barrier to home ownership is getting that down payment cost. And, it keeps you out where, you might be paying an equivalent amount in rent that mortgage payment, but there's so many other things that keep you from it. And so, I don't think this is the universal experience. Certainly the people I spoke to said, I'm building equity out of this. I own it. There are also people who are entering this program who I think naturally self-select into this because they believe in kind of a community-minded.
Their value system
their values align with the program. So I don't think it's the best fit for everybody, but for people who say, we have two incomes, we're making, maybe not crazy amounts of money, but we're making $75,000 in Seattle. That's still not enough to buy a house.
Oh yeah, no.
And yet, by any account that would pay your rent, but it doesn't buy a house, So, I think there's probably some kind of bias there in the sense of folks that are involved. So I mean, I think that the solutions model is really helpful for a story like this because, we can at it and say, it's not the silver bullet. This is not the only thing that is going to fix affordable housing in this community. But I think particularly readers who, as you said, it bleeds, it leads, right? There's some fatigue in that. Like, the world is really rough right now.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, we've got impeachment here, all kinds of just, everyone's worn out, I think.
I mean, it's been grim for a while. And like I said, this isn't some kind of pie in the sky. We're only writing fluff things, right? Like hard questions about, does this work? How can you demonstrate this works? We ask about the limitations and some of the criticism that you would acknowledge. But I think for readers in Charlotte, I think it's important when you see this kind of boogeyman of there's no affordable housing, it's no problem. I think it also kind of, sometimes when you make problems so big that they're impossible, you almost let leaders off the hook to do anything about it.
Okay, that's powerful. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, I think if you can throw your hands up and say there's actually nothing that can make a substantive decision or difference, then nothing can be done, right? And I think that some of the work of solutions journalism is not to advocate for one solution over another, but to say, have you really actually looked at what you can be doing, for city and county leaders, whether that's locally or federally, this idea that nothing can be done, I think, is a bit of a cop-out. And I think reporters are responsible for kind of poking at that and saying, is that really true? Because look what Seattle or Chicago or Baltimore is doing about these similar problems. That might be apples to apples communities to ours, but certainly you know, similarities that you force them to say either we're not considering that or we don't think it'll work, and please tell me why you think that.
Well, tell us a little bit more about, I see, I mean, obviously I know her, but maybe the folks here don't know Charisse and the
Yeah, so this is Charisse Blackman. She's the, she is the executive director, yeah, that's her title, executive director of the West Side Community Land Trust, which is kind of Charlotte's equivalent of the Seattle program that I had looked at. They are making great strides. They are, but they are, you know, earlier in their work than Seattle, which has been around for 25 or 30 years. And it is kind of a radical idea in Charlotte, and like you said, of this like communal land ownership model. So what they are doing, they're a nonprofit, and they are currently in the process of acquiring land and either donated homes or starting to build homes on properties primarily in West Charlotte, given their name, that they you know, see things going wild. The land that she's sitting on now actually has a house on it now. This picture is from about 1.5 years ago, and the land that she bought, that the land trust bought here, they bought for, I'm going to mess up the numbers, but somewhere around $20,000 for the lot. Very quickly afterwards, the lot next to it sold for like 3 times as much. So I was watching, you know, kind of change.
It's a game. I mean, it's a race. It really is a race. It's been a race, and I think this has been kind of my feeling since the days I was running a law school clinic and observing a lot of things, is that, you know, when they were expanding the Blue Line out past UNC Charlotte and the transit-oriented development, and I remember myself, and there was Owen Furseth from UNCC and John Howard, who worked in the city, and I remember we were trying so hard to try to get the attention of you know, Deborah Campbell, all these folks in the planning department to think about a municipal land bank. You know, we were just falling all over ourselves, you know.
We're going to do it again with the Silver Line. I asked them a year ago, I said, are we going to do land banking for the Silver Line, right? That's a solution story to ask, you know.
Yeah. I mean, if this is, you know, it's, yeah, I hope, you know, it's one of those things where if we had solutions in we had like journalism was looking at these, not necessarily personalities, right? Because it's almost always like, well, there's Patrick Cannon, he's doing crazy stuff. You know, let's focus in on this personality. Let's look at this topic, like the municipal land bank, this notion of what in Detroit, like the municipality is just taking these properties and they're sticking in there. Now, one of the problems is that I think we're not home rule like, you know, like many of the other states. So Raleigh, you know obviously all HB2, you know, you do something good in your town and they'll just shake it up and take it from you. But I think some of the models are, we have this municipal land bank, we put the property in there, automatically clears title. You don't even have to do all the weird title, you know, things. And then you have a plot of land that, you know, you could allow Habitat to build something on. You have the land trust could build something on. So that was something that we had been trying to kind of put before the powers that be, not very successfully, obviously, but no, I think that there's so many great ideas like that. That's like one off the top of my head that I think would be, because I will say this, I think Charisse and the Community Land Trust are doing a bang up job, but if you think about it, this is such a systemic wide scale sort of thing that a municipally held land bank that is just pocketing land and particularly around centers of transit, you know. So as we expand the transit, you know, there's a lot of, you know, low hanging fruit, you know, properties that probably have lien upon lien upon lien that maybe the developers don't want to touch quite yet, you know. And it's a race, as I think, it's a race against developers who are obviously zooming in there and trying to gobble up everything. I mean, just look at Tryon going towards UNCC, you know, now there are all these South End looking, you know, things all over that place. And so, you know, I think that, you know, I think that, again, I love this idea of solution, like putting up forward a solution, not necessarily focus on personalities or, you know, who's doing this or who's doing that, but something in that regard. I don't know. I'm just ranting and you can stop.
No, and certainly, and you know, not every solution is a good fit for any community, right? Like an Apple, like the way that Detroit handles land banking, has a much different, their problem is I lived at, my last job was in Toledo, just an hour south of Detroit. And Toledo has many of the same problems. And so as Detroit does, in the sense that it's blight and empty homes and deferred maintenance and decreasing property values and, flight out of the city,
buildings and stuff,
which is like the opposite of Charlotte. Charlotte, where we put all these people. So, you can look at those things and say, what can we take from this that is helpful and what is not applicable to our community? So, those are types of stories, Chris, if you advance a slide or so, some of the kind of solution stories that we've done have been a little bit less involved than, travel, and that's less possible now in these days. But, they can be pretty straightforward things. Roof Above, which is the new name for the men's shelter and urban ministry center that merged a little over a year ago, bought an apartment complex in East Charlotte. And that really kind of was for the first time this idea that they are getting into more than kind of, congregate shelters as well as transitional living. And this was something that, I think is arguably a solution story in the idea that, we will follow this and pay attention to this. And, are they able to, move folks in? Are they going to meet pushback from the community? I live in East Charlotte. And so, my neighborhood Facebook pages kind of were very interested in this. They can be big or small stories about, something that's being done. It's like 300 some units, right? That's not going to solve the affordable housing crisis. But one thing that I have written about a lot is this disappearance of NOAHs, which, if folks are unfamiliar, it's naturally occurring affordable housing, which means housing that's not already subsidized. It doesn't, have government vouchers. It doesn't have, restricted rents. It's just because of the age or location of the property. They are considered naturally occurring affordable housing because their rents are
below market or so,
or whatever. So there's this idea that there's this disappearance of it because developers are coming in, a new countertop and a coat of paint and raise your rent.
Backing it up, yeah.
So there's this kind of race to how do we save these? And much like the Roof Above property I mentioned, that is definitely a NOAH. It's, was built in the 80s. It was, had been updated, but wasn't kind of the real fancy luxury apartments. And there's a group in Charlotte, an investment group whose name is absolutely blanking on me, Ascent. And they have this $58 million fund that they announced, I think in November, where they are attempting to purchase 1,500 units of these NOAH properties with some help from city and county money, as well as some other kind of financing they can take advantage of as a affordable development, and basically restrict the rents for at least 20 or 30 years. And so things that 1,500 units, I'm not downplaying their work, that's not enough, but there's these like overlapping solutions that we can look at and say, is this the best way to spend our money? I think one thing that we at the Observer have written about kind of in a piecemeal way is to say, there's some criticism coming or some kind of reckoning around, is the best way to spend our housing bond money, which has been largely popular with voters. Yeah. Is new development the best way to spend that money? Is that the most efficient way to do it? Because it takes 2 years and it takes an enormous amount of financing, and not saying that it's a bad use of money, but I think that there are some advocates and folks on council that would say, is this really where we should put our money, or should we be doing something more like saving the units that already exist? Because does it matter if it takes us 2 years to build 200 units? Meanwhile, developers bought 4 apartment complexes and raised the rents on all of them. So now everybody who lived there now doesn't have anywhere to live.
Yeah, no, I think that I love this conversation. I obviously love the conversations before that we've had with obviously Charisse and the West Side Community Land Trust and the Housing Justice Coalition. Is another organization that is a little bit more on the housing as a human right kind of take. And so we've got a lot of different players. So I'm telling you from my perspective of looking at affordable housing and community development when I was at the law school, 4 or 5 years ago, before I guess, they shut the law school down and kicked me out of Charlotte. So I'm back though. and now is that you do have a lot of different, there are a lot of different voices. And I'm hoping that some of those folks are in this audience, because I know that I have been sort of attending calls from both the Housing Justice Coalition. There is, a growing community benefits coalition that is starting to grow up, so that they're interested in the community benefits agreements as a solution to a lot of things here. And I encouraged them to come here. I said, I got the media here. It's not in a good way, guys. Come on, this is the show to show up. And obviously I can put you in touch with the folks involved with that movement. But I will tell you this, I think that one of the things that, and actually Ishmael from the Housing Justice, he was going to be on here, but he sent me an email and said, I can't be on here. So please share this, is that I'll tell you, I think that the one thing that I think is going to be, it's not a hot topic, but I think it may very well become a hot topic, is the Charlotte Futures 2040 plan. That's going to sort of revolutionize planning and things such as affordable housing and use of like something called a unified development ordinance and a type of use ordinance, which sounds very benign on its face, right? Okay, well, we've got the city here, and it basically just makes it very easy for developers to say, okay, I want it here. As long as I meet this, and this, I can go through it. And the decisions are more made by staff and not through the legislative process of the city council, which obviously from the people's standpoint, that takes away a lot of leverage, where, they can kind of go to the city council, say, protest and things of that nature, which has historically been the way that neighborhoods and community organizations have been able to leverage and have a voice in the development process, has been precisely at that legislative angle where the decision is before the city council. One of the interesting things about the 2040 plan is that it may very well take that, it's in the spirit of sort of streamlining development, which, efficiency, if I were to, it makes very good sense to me, but I think that, one of the issues could be is that if you have a place or a type, you may very well have situations where this was once a single family kind of neighborhood, and then you're just kind of like Noda, you're just throwing up big, throwing up big next to neighborhood theater, right? It's like, what is that? It's like, these, and because, there's always going to be the push for more density. And I think that if you look at the plan, there's some very smart people who are working on this plan with the city staff. I think you can tell that. And it definitely is peppered with very, in my, for my value system, very good language, things such as equity, and they discuss, sort of systemic issues with gentrification and redlining and the history of urban renewal and things of that nature. But I think the output could very well just be another version of old wine in new bottles. And I think that's kind of what I'm picking up from these community coalitions who I had made connections with when I was at the law school, and I've since reconnected with. But I think what I'm going to say is that I think there are a lot of stories in the grassroots about housing from, I even got an interesting story that the Housing Justice Coalition shared with me about how they went to a neighborhood called Howie Acres, and they were able to kind of fight off a developer. That normally they don't win, and they were able to cut the developer off at the pass, and he dropped his plan and left, so he wasn't going to put high rises in this neighborhood. So I think that I'm hoping with the purpose of this show and why I love the fact that we've got you and Chris and these other, media folks, is that I want to see the grassroots and those voices connected and, again, presenting their solutions, right? Because they do have solutions. It's not just rage. I think that's, I think that, sometimes you come up with a solution because of, anger or what's happening to your neighborhood or being displaced out of your neighborhood. And not just not being able to afford, but, they change the things and the property tax gets so high that, you got to leave or other things of that nature. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just really excited by this particular your topic. This is fantastic. Keep going.
Well, I'm certainly happy to talk more about my work. I don't know if I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat, or if we want to, folks want to ask questions. I will just say more broadly that I will just put out the pitch that, certainly I will make sure that my contact information is available if that's something can be followed up on or whatever. But, I would always rather know something is happening. I will put out the disclaimer that, we can't always get to everything immediately because But I would so much rather know what's going on or introduce yourself if you're part of a neighborhood group or a nonprofit or an organization that, or just, you know, someone who reads and cares about affordable housing. You know, I certainly would love to make those connections. It is one thing I feel very frustrated about the pandemic is that my favorite parts of being a reporter is meeting people and going to community meetings, and getting coffee and things like that. And so I've a little starved for that. And so please bother me. And certainly our partners with the CJC, you know, sometimes something works better as a TV story than a radio story, or, you know, it's an audience that is perfect for La Noticia, or, you know, that it's somewhere where really there's a readership that this would fit well with, and we can certainly work together. But I think one thing I've learned out of the collaborative is that, you know, there are stories that work better for certain outlets that are better for certain reporters, you know, lived experience or backgrounds. And so, you know, I'm happy to make connections as well if you think that there's a better fit or a partnership that can be done that we, you know, absolutely should involve Q Notes or QCD Metro or someone like that. So I will just put that out there as well, that I have very talented colleagues across the collaborative that would all love to talk to you all. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm really, you know, again, you know, just being this, your regular, you know, media consumer, to know that there's an intentionality from our media folks, and it's not just, okay, this newsroom's been shut down, now they're owned by this group or something like that, that there's actually something that is a very different model that is getting back to sort of the roots of in my opinion, you know, of journalism, and to a sense that, you know, one of the like, you know, theories underlying the First Amendment is that we have a robust First Amendment to help us govern ourselves. They call it like the self-governing theory of the First Amendment. And it sounds like solutions journalism, by giving citizens and governments options, things to think about, things to consider, things to debate, helps us with that sort of legislative, democratic, small d process. So, I mean, so that's great. Do we have any questions? I guess I know, Lauren, you I mean, if there are folks in the audience, we'd love to get them.
yeah, I'm just looking at the chat here.
And real quick, I want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, real quick, I want to apologize for Lauren to Lauren for not switching out the photo on that last slide. I will also put some links. I can't see the chat, so with the way the share screen is, so I'll make sure that links are in there for the stories that Lauren mentioned. And you know, I'm just gonna flip through these. You know, these are part of these last two slides, just to quickly note them. These are, you know, this is why we do these things, and you know, the more we can connect with community members around this. So I'll make sure there's ways that you guys can connect with us if you want to keep up with what the CJC is doing. I have to say, check out our graphic novel on COVID-19. You can do so on the website. And then let me just stop share, and I'll share our email addresses as well. But I want to make sure we have time for these questions.
And I'm going to make one plug for the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, because I think, as we had talked, you know, it is currently, and I'll throw a little bit of nonprofit law just for everybody here, is that they're currently what we call a fiscally sponsored project of, is it the library? Is it that's this fiscal sponsor, Chris?
Yes. Yes,
So,
the library is our fiscal sponsor of most projects, and then SJ, we're actually a project of the Solutions Journalism Network until May 2022.
So there is a possibility that, well, not a possibility, it is a reality, because you are fiscally sponsored by a 501c3, that if you really agree or you believe in what's going on here, this very very revolutionary and just innovative form and solutions-based journalism, and you want to see more of it here in Charlotte, how can folks send their support to the CJC, since you're kind of a fiscally sponsored project? Obviously, they can't write a check to CJC. Who would they write a check to?
The best thing would be to email me and to discuss that. Typically, right now, they would probably make a donation to the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library Foundation, which would serve as our fiscal sponsor for that. But we'd have to communicate with the library to make sure that that can go through. But we can easily do that. And so I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Just want to point out, we have a question from Jimmy.
Yes. So for folks that can't see the chat, Jimmy's question says, what are the challenges within your newsrooms regarding solutions-based journalism? Do you have a hard time selling a story based on news items from the grassroots organizations? I guess I will say I have been fortunate because actually the Observer's participation in the collaborative predated my hiring by not a couple months, not a ton, but they knew I was coming and kind of said, you know, you're going to be a part of this. So that hasn't been so much of a hard sell. I think broadly in journalism, as I had said, there's kind of this kind of push and pull about like, is solutions journalism advocacy? And I would argue it's not, particularly because you poke at the limitations of solutions and you know, certainly nothing that we write about we're declaring is the thing that's going to solve affordable housing. And you know, anything that fits the solutions model should be, you know, looked at for its limitations or its drawbacks or any unintended consequences. But I do think broadly there's kind of this rethinking of kind of what journalism's role is in offering solutions and not just saying like the world is broken and let us tell you about it, which has been kind of the models in the time. And I think there's still a role for that, right? It's still our job to like expose problems when they exist. But I think readers, understandably, if you only consume that, you just think, well, then what do we do? Like what? Sometimes it's just super depressing and there's more that you need to do with that. But so I have not found a difficult time getting buy-in there. I think journalism as a whole is still learning about where solutions journalism fits into kind of a more traditional model. As far as getting stories around grassroots, I think it's not so much selling it to the newsrooms. I think newsrooms still have a lot of work to do about building trust in grassroots communities. I mean, I'd say, honestly, particularly for legacy media that has not always treated communities of color and, you know, folks that are not kind of traditionally in the power structure well. Like, I think, you know, it long predates pretty much anyone who's currently in the newsroom, but that doesn't mean we don't carry the legacy of that, and it's our job to work to do better. And so I think, honestly, the flip side of that is actually like, it's much harder to get folks who, you know, are on the ground doing work, but sometimes have not been treated well by the media, to, you know, open up to us and to, you know, use their full name or to, you know, trust us with really vulnerable stories. And so I think, honestly, it's actually the reverse. It's the fact that our editors are starting to recognize, you know, we need more of these voices in the paper, but we also need to do a lot of work to deserve their time and attention. How do you balance communities with developers? Yeah, that's very true, particularly in Charlotte. So the question said, how do you balance communities with developers and reporting? Developers are an outsized voice in the city. I think the media ignores the power dynamics. I would agree. So some of that is that, so my job as the affordable housing reporter, I have tended to not focus as much on individual projects going up unless they are very notable for some reason, whether they're in a controversial area or there's an enormous amount of public funding, but just the kind of run-of-the-mill projects, I have tended to take a step back and look at it from more of an issues base because you can't follow every project that goes through. However, we do also have a colleague of mine on our business team who is our growth and development reporter who handles both commercial and residential development. And so her work involves a lot more with developers, but she is also very kind of focused on the idea that there is a power imbalance there. So I think part of it is that historically news organizations have covered housing as a real estate beat versus a housing beat, which I think is a very different thing. Like, it sounds similar, but there's really, like, if you say I'm a housing reporter versus a real estate reporter, there's a different emphasis there on who you're writing for and about. But there's still, you know, a lot of work to be done. I'm not going to pretend like we figured it out. But yes, there's definitely a power dynamic, and reporters are would do well to remember that more. What is wrong with the city and the county to put up the land and monies to have it to address? What is wrong? You mean, how is that not working? Maybe I'm not totally understanding the question. To put up land and monies that they have to address affordable housing. Oh, about the criticism probably I had said around the housing bond. I think it's not so much so let me back up here. So I think the question was, you know, where's the criticism around the housing bond? I think for a quick history, so for years and years and years, every 2 years voters had voted on $15 million for the city's housing trust fund, which was used for capital money to spend on new development projects, which there was like a range of incomes, usually under 80% AMI, but a range of income levels, all restricted for their rent. And then in 2018, for the first time, the city asked voters to approve $50 million for the bond. And they approved it again in November. And so there was another $50 million. And that was met with overwhelming support. I think it passed like 70-30 or something, like it was overwhelmingly supported. But, you know, it's a pretty narrow focus of how you can use the money. They have only just started to say, well, maybe we can also use that money that we've raised to rehab existing projects or to, you know, provide home repairs, things like that. And so I think there's just a push from some circles of either advocates or city council members to be a little bit more creative in their thinking and not be so narrow in we can only build new units with this, because some of the limitations, as I've mentioned, is that it takes a long time to finance and build it. And you get at the end 200 units, which is great, but you know, net effect, is there a more efficient way to use that money? So it's not that I think anyone says we shouldn't spend city and county money on affordable housing or new development, but I think that there's a challenge from some people to, you know, is there a way that we can be more creative with our money to get it to go further?
I think that we kind of playing into that Charlotte 2040 plan, you know, is a comprehensive plan that's going to dictate sort of how Charlotte is going to sort of grow, and part of that is affordable housing and housing related issues. And you know, I think that I was told that they haven't updated it since 1975, and so this is a revolutionary, it's a watershed year. I think 2021 for development and growth, and I think that I think it's incumbent about citizens to kind of get more involved and have an opinion. You know, I mean, to really kind of get involved and learn about what is going on, because again, if only one side is kind of pushing the reform, you know, and I would say the developers and some of the other folks who, I mean, if I were on their side, yeah, absolutely, I would like it to be streamlined. I would like to be able to understand my cost up ahead. But at the same time, we have seen, you know, the ramifications of sort of unchecked sort of development and redevelopment in our urban cities since, you know, I mean, they called it urban renewal back, you know, in 1950 or 40 or something like that. And again, you know, I think that that these are anything. I think it's a great thing to have, you know, the press and the media to be there to hear all the different voices and to really make this a real, I know this man sounds idealist, like a democracy, like where we actually have, you know, all the different voices to be able to kind of hash it out and come up with the actual solution. And so, yeah, I hope we got more questions, because I was really excited when you and Chris Lauren and Chris were coming, because this is so needed.
I want to touch on Jimmy's question real quick about balancing communities with developers and making sure that the community is heard in our reporting. I will say that's one of our big goals of this collaborative, you know, starting with that Imagine Home event where we brought the community in and brought reporters in. And so we kind of broke down that barrier where reporters could talk directly to community members. And, you know, COVID has kind of put a hitch in that to a point. You know, but we're trying to continue to figure out how can we do these virtually where we can better, you know, involve the community in what the stories are. Because I will say, you know, when the collaborative picked affordable housing as the topic this collaborative would focus on, that came from, you know, those conversations with community members. That was driven by people in the public, not by, you know, there were plenty of issues and topics that this collaborative could focus on, and that was heard by the community members, you know, everywhere we turned. And so I I hope that we'll continue to find new ways to do that, where we can really connect those community stories into this, because it's a huge part of the conversation and responses.
And I see Mr. Williams has added some additional questions under his original question. He's asking.
Yeah,
Looked at.
I can take the, so Mr. Williams had asked, has anyone looked at getting the churches involved? They have land in a lot of closed churches that can be remodeled. And actually, yes. And I think the faith community has been one of the, frankly, one of the kind of unsung heroes in the affordable housing conversation. And I know that I have written about, and some of my colleagues in the journalism collaborative, as well as other media folks that are not in the collaborative, have written about this kind of on an individual basis. But a lot of churches are getting involved. There's some kind of bigger name, I would say probably historically wealthier churches, Myers Park, I'm going to get the names wrong, Covenant Presbyterian, some of the other ones have donated significant amounts, like in the 1 to 2 million range, to various projects. Other churches like, oh shoot, it's the one on 7th and McDowell. Is that?
First Methodist. Is that it? No.
No, it's an AME Zion church.
Oh.
Shoot, that's embarrassing. I wrote a story about it and I'm blanking on the name, but it's
Little Rock? Is it Little Rock?
Little Rock, yes. I'm like, I know it's an AME Zion church. Yes, Little Rock is in Uptown, and they are with the city and a affordable housing developer building 100-some low-income apartments on land that they own next to the church. And to do that, they actually had to move 2 of those historic shotgun churches or shotgun homes that I'm sure folks will remember driving by. They actually moved those, and the homes were actually taken over by the land trust. So it's really one big circle here. So the land trust took possession of those homes, which are going to be renovated and rented out as affordable apartments. So the church had donated their land, and they have a development corporation affiliated with the church that is helping kind of get that project off the ground. But several area congregations have gotten actively involved in big and small ways, right? Whether that's just welcoming in community organizations to talk to their congregations, or putting up, pretty eye-popping amounts of money in some cases for certain projects. There's one in Gurr Heights that Gurr Heights Presbyterian is active in. And so I think the faith community definitely could use more attention from us, certainly, about kind of what the work they've been doing, but certainly that has been a place that they have been active in that space.
I was just going to make a comment. So I feel like a lot of people have, they're passionate about affordable housing, and everyone knows we need more, but I think kind of the average Joe doesn't really know where to start. So how do you, it's almost like maybe if we had a checklist, it's like, this is how you get involved. This is, you need to contact, at some point you need to go in front of the board, the city council, or, just like a checklist of how if you want to get involved, that these are the steps that you need to take. So, or if it's happening in your neighborhood, this is what you do. And then, so.
Yeah. And I would think, I don't necessarily have a checklist off the top of my head, but I think broadly, the affordable housing is a spectrum, right? And so I think my beat has kind of expanded a bit from everything from home ownership to affordable rental housing to homelessness and housing insecurity. And so there's kind of that spectrum of where folks are. And so I think if you are looking to get involved, I think there's kind of a conversation you have with yourself about where your passions are, right? Do you want to get involved to educate yourself? Do you want to do in-person volunteering? Do you want to give your money, and you need to figure out what's a responsible way that, fits, I guess, your vision and worldview. And so I think there's kind of different ways about that. I guess just selfishly, I will plug, there's a lot of great reporting being done. Certainly, yes, please subscribe to the Observer, but also more broadly, WFAE has a phenomenal Finding Home series, a week, and it's almost always you know, a pretty regular way to get kind of what is the big affordable housing story of the day or week or month. And that's something that, you know, if you plug that into your routine, if you, you know, routinely read, you know, pretty much anyone in our partnership, right, we're writing about it. And so that can be a good way to educate yourself about, like, where do I feel like I want to get involved, whether that's, you know, is my church doing anything? Is my neighborhood doing anything? You know, there's some big issue coming in front of city council. I'll watch the live stream and try to educate myself. So I think there's a lot of ways to do that, but, you know, it looks different for other, you know, some people want to be the grassroots community activists. Some people want to, you know, give a portion of whatever their charitable contributions would be in a given year, or, you know, just educate themselves and be knowledgeable, whether that's following city council or reading news articles or whatever. So I think that there's probably a thing that fits everybody, but it doesn't look the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to kind of get involved, whether, you know, you through your own church or through nonprofits. I'll put in a plug for our guest that we had last month, the Housing Justice Coalition. I know they have a sign up. I think if you find them on Twitter or something like that, I know you can Google it, like Housing Justice Coalition in Charlotte. If you join it, they have a group that does a lot of the research, and if you are a member, you can get a newsletter from them about, you know, they're very they're kind of like reporters themselves. In fact, I think that's him. I think that's Jimmy from the Housing Justice Coalition. I just saw Jimmy. I think that's him. One of the guys.
Say thanks, Jimmy, for posting that.
Yeah, and so no, I've learned a lot. You know, just because, you know, they'll attend the council meetings and the county commission meetings and things, and I think you know, they're providing a really valuable service. Again, you know, it's there is movement in this grassroots area, and I think that connecting, you know, voices like the Housing Justice Coalition or you know, the growing Community Benefits Coalition to the Affordable Housing Reporters, I think would be, you know, a great way to kind of give a more balanced, you know, view of what's really going on in the city, because, you know, it's like that physics, like there's this thing, but there's another force that's coming too. And I think that, you know, and again, I'll make another plug for the library. You know, I think that we're blessed to have, you know, a public library system that is willing to hold this forum and have, you know, really kind of helping support, you know, citizens and democracy through, like, you know, allowing me a platform to have these shows here to kind of talk about, you know, affordable housing, you know, and such. I mean, like, I know we took a little detour from the nonprofit law things, but I talked about fiscal sponsorship, right? So I did kind of get that out there. And I know Greg wants to make a plug for the next Fridays with Rocky, because I think we're going to get back to basics with that one. Is that right, Greg?
Well, yeah. Real quick, it looks like we have a couple other comments.
Oh, we got questions. Okay, forget what I'm saying. Get back to the question.
Well, yeah, I just want to. Yeah, Mr. Williams added again. He said he retired to focus on affordable housing in Charlotte, and he studied architecture for the past 3 years at CPCC, and his email's in there. So that's great. Hopefully, this opens up some avenues for him.
And I wanted to, and real quick, I wanted to add, we're working on a widget for these affordable housing stories from the CJC. So, you know, if you're part of a nonprofit organization and want to connect these stories to the work you're doing, we're hoping to be able to launch that in the spring, but where it would automatically feed these stories to your site through this widget that could be placed on there. And our hope is that it just furthers the conversation across these different organizations and different groups throughout the city.
And I do want to thank everybody for hanging around past the top of the hour. I know we got started a little late. Some people had some trouble getting in, and I apologize for that. So we can start winding it down now, or if anyone has any other questions and our guests are willing to hang out, I'll be happy to stay on.
I did want to bring up, you know, the seniors, because I think that especially in these neighborhoods on the west side and on the east side, is that, you know, these property values are going up and up and up, and they're forcing out the seniors because there is no grandfathering in for seniors with the property taxes, where it is that way in so many other states. And recently I learned that Mecklenburg County can't change it because it's a state, it has to go through the state. And so, you know, it's almost a no-brainer. So what's the holdup with that? Because we have to protect our seniors also, you know, because they're extremely vulnerable in this affordable housing, especially because they were, you know, a lot of these neighborhoods were working class neighborhoods to begin with. And these people have lived there for 40 and 50 years. Does anyone know about that?
I will be honest, I don't know a ton of specific, I don't want to speak beyond my, what I can say with confidence as far as that. I am not super familiar with how that all works, but I am happy to take a look at it.
Okay. I mean, I just heard that. I can't even remember where I heard. I can't remember if it was, I read it or heard it through the news, or I can't even remember. You know, I'm getting old.
No, there's just too much. It's just too much news. There's just too much.
So, but you know, I mean, I live in Chantilly and I've lived there for 20 years, and you know, the seniors, I see them hit so hard, you know, because they've lived there, and you know, some of them are in their 90s. I've seen them pass away, and you know, some kids try and hold on to the property, but they themselves don't have the money to renovate it or live in it. So sometimes it gets torn down and sometimes it gets rented out. And so
I'll take a look too, Christina. And Lauren, I don't know if you remember this. For some reason, I feel like Lexi from WCNC was possibly doing a story on that, but I'll take a look and see if she did, and if so, forward it over.
all right, thank you.
So I guess we can wind it down now. If there are no more questions, again, I want to thank everyone for attending today, and our guest for staying on for some extra time. And I do want to plug March 5th, I'll be talking to some people from the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. They're going to be on with me that Friday talking about all their services and how they've had to pivot during COVID-19, but they're a great local institution. And then we're going to have Rocky back on March 19th for an open format Ask Me Anything, or Ask Rocky.
Well, on nonprofit law. Maybe not ask me every. I might lie though if you do ask me.
Nonprofit law and Marvel Comics. That's what.
Well, I think economic development.
I have to call Sheldon Drum to come in and help me with the questions about Marvel Comics.
And we do have a series in the works, but I think we're going to wait a few days to reveal the details about that and a couple other events. But I appreciate you guys taking your time to join us this morning, and it's been a very illuminating conversation. And Chris, Lauren, we'll love to have you guys back and follow up later in the year. And please feel free to join any of our conversations here. It's been great having you guys. Thanks again.
That sounds great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.